How long were you on this hospital board? You were on many years, right?
I don't remember.
You didn't remember.
I thought you were asking about doctors, not about.
Okay, well,
I don't remember.
it's
It was a few years.
health. Okay, well, tell them about the doctors that you remember, when they were here and where they practiced from.
Well, I first I was hired by Dr. J.W. Helland and GM, they were brothers.
Okay.
And Clarence Helland, the brother, ran the drugstore. He was a pharmacist downstairs, where the drugstore is now. Then we were located upstairs. I started in July of 1944. Things are a little different then than now. An interesting thing is there's a conduit upstairs, it's probably still there. Like a corner conduit on a house. We would send our prescriptions down to the drugstore through that.
You dropped
Them through that conduit, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And let's see what else. Well, we didn't have a refrigerator up there, so all vaccines were kept downstairs in the drugstore. So every time someone came in for a shot, which was often, I ran down to the drugstore in the refrigerator and picked out the vaccines. I did literally run.
Yeah.
Ran upstairs with them. Then a little later, when I had the time, I'd run down back with them. Maybe 15 minutes later, somebody else had come in for a shot, so I had to run back down. This went on, well, I don't know if we ever had a refrigerator while I worked there, but I worked there about 3 years then. And they were very nice to work for, JW and GM, very kind. They used to do surgery, appendicitis operations, gallbladder.
Really? At the hospital?
Yes, and deliveries. Deliveries cost, I think, $25. And appendectomies cost $35. Office calls were $3 if you spend quite a little time. Otherwise, $2. We do x-rays.
Okay, let's talk about the dentists and where were the first dentists? So, upstairs in one of those stores, weren't they?
Well, yeah, Dr. Kahn, but there were dentists in there probably before him. I don't know. The only one I remember up there was Dr. Kahn in the front rooms.
Okay.
But I don't know too much about him, except when he wasn't busy, he'd always be back there visiting or reading stuff. The doctor, he was in their library spending a lot of his leisure time.
Huh.
And they did the x-ray taking for him, then I would develop his dental x-rays for him in the doctor's
Really?
office. Yeah.
Boy, and then who was here before Dr. Morlock? There was another, I think.
Oh, it's just on the tip of my tongue. I
there's
called
a
Dr.
doctor.
Karpelis.
Karpelis,
He took over, he was up in Doc Kahn's office, wasn't he?
I don't really
Dr.
know.
I can't remember for sure, but
Dr. killed, you know, in the car
Dr.
accident.
Karpelis,
Okay.
Suddenly.
I think they live up,
Maybe they did, but he probably was in that office.
that's right, I can't remember for sure now, but he came after Dr. Kahn, I suppose,
I
was
think
killed.
he's the first one that came after
Yeah,
that.
and then Fritz came, did he come in?
And the bank owned the building Fritz was in, Dr. Morlock was in. Did the bank build that just for him, or I can't remember how that
Was
worked.
that originally Chris Schansberg's office? I think so. So it must have been really remodeled though, you know, see. But Bert Schansberg's dad had an insurance office there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
Chris Schansberg.
uh-huh. So they remodeled it for Dr. Morlock.
Yeah. And then I suppose the bank must have bought that, you know, property, you know, which is natural for them to do that, you know, right next to it like that. And then they remodeled it.
Dr. Morlock came in 73, maybe?
He did.
2 or 3.
Yeah, he must
We
have.
were in Mabel at the time he came.
Donnie Nesham, you know, he got to be an all-state football player. He was in Power Rover since he graduated in 50. I think it was when he was a junior, Vernon Twyla was fullback, his first cousin. He was a senior. And they were playing Lewiston down here, and Spring Grove. It was a battle between the fullbacks, and Spring Grove beat him by, I think, 7-6, something like that. They didn't. And anyway, Donnie got kicked in the mouth. Donnie Nesham got kicked in the mouth that time. You maybe remember that, maybe. And you know, you could just see, he came on the sideline. He's just in agony. And he went to Doc Kahn apparently, because Doc Kahn told me later he said, you know, he fixed up Donnie's, you know, and he lost, I don't know how many teeth he lost, you know, and I suppose he ended up in partial plate or something, you know. And then he said, oh, I shouldn't do that. He said, actually, I've often thought that if I would have had a son, I don't know if I'd want him to play football. He made that remark. You know, now it could have been after he fixed up Donnie, possibly, you know, but so you can shut off the camera.
When I became a permanent resident of Spring Grove in 1944, there were several ladies' aids. There was a St. Peter's, a St. John's, a Bethlehem, and I think the one in town was called the Spring Grove Ladies' Aid, and the Dorcas Society, which was a group of younger women. And I was looking at a book today that I received that was published in 1932, and these ladies' aids started in the late 1880s. And they met in the homes. They started with maybe 5 or 6 ladies, and they seemed to be grouped by area. There was a group south of town, there was a group west of town. The Spring Grove Ladies' Aid was the town ladies' aid. Because of the communication problem and transportation problem, they stayed in their own areas. And then there was the large group, the Women's Missionary Federation, WMF, that met once a month at church. And they served dinners, and they had many money-making projects. I remember the Bethlehem, I think it was, Ladies' Aid had a Norwegian smorgasbord for several years. That was their project. And then, I don't remember the year, but when the ELCA reorganized, then we were to divide up into circles. And some of the women objected to that. They didn't want to give up their ladies' aids. So, I was chairman of the committee that did the grouping. And we decided we better stay in neighborhoods, and maybe they'd be happier that way than they would be putting in a strange group. So we divided them up, and it was rather amusing. Sometimes we'd put 2 women in the same circle, and the woman on the committee would say, oh, you can't put those 2 in the same group, they don't get along. So we had to do some changing around. And the funny part of it was the women who didn't get along were relatives. Maybe that isn't so strange anyway. And then we divided up into circles. At one time, I think we had 23 or 24 circles. And we met in the homes, and then they had the large group that, Welco they called it, that met once a month in the church. And they were responsible for serving the meatball dinners and so forth. And the circles took care of serving at funerals and weddings and things like that. That was the service groups at that time. And I was amused to look at this book that I received. It was published in 1932.
1933.
And it tells all the history of the ladies' aid. The book belongs to Borghild Blagan. And it's an old book, you can see, and pictures of all the ladies' aids in front of homes. They must have taken a picture of the ladies' aids about every year of all the women, and it lists some of the charter members of the ladies' aids. It's a very interesting book. I wish I would have had more time to look at it. But I thought it was interesting that the ladies' aid started when Pastor Ruckley was here, and that was in the late 1880s.
Do you know when the church became part of ELC?
I don't remember the date when that was reorganized. That's when we divided up into circles and the ladies' aids were disbanded, but I don't remember the year.
That really wasn't that long ago, though, was it?
No. Oh, I suppose it's at least, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't remember just what that was. And I remember one time for the June meeting of the Ladies' Aid, they had a bride's program. And anybody who could get into their wedding dresses wore their wedding dresses and paraded down the aisle in the church, just like you did when you were being married. And that was a sort of a fun meeting that I remember. There were lots of the women that had their wedding dresses, and it was fun to see. Some went back to the early 1900s and then all the way up through the years. And it was fun, and it was interesting to see all the different dresses.
Hats on too, they say some of the
No,
same-
we didn't have hats on then. We had veils and things like that. But they have had programs where they've all had hats, worn hats.
So was there a program every month for the leaders?
There usually is a program, and now I think they only meet about every other month. We call it the Ladies' Aid. Now, WELCA. And they meet sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes in the evening. But there is a program with a speaker usually or something. Now, they just had a mother-daughter banquet in May. That was their May meeting.
So they still call it the Ladies' Aid?
That's what I call
Yeah.
it. I don't know. It's called WELCA. The Women's
But people still
Evangelical.
refer to it as the Ladies'
Yeah,
Aid.
Ladies' Aid, and then there are the individual circles. And there aren't as many circles now as there used to be either. They have service groups, really. Originally, the circles were set up to be Bible study and work groups, the same. And they kind of got away from that. They had divided into two different groups. Groups that were just the work groups and didn't have Bible study, and then the circles that had Bible study. And now they have divided work groups where they have men and women that serve coffee after services, and if there are any funerals, weddings and things that they serve for.
Now, the Ladies' Aid historically always raised money for particular charities or particular functions.
Yeah.
They would raise money. They started as temperance groups. There was very close connection between the Ladies' Aid
A lot of them
driving out saloons and things.
In this book, I couldn't see it very well, but it even lists some of the things that they gave the money to.
Yeah,
And I know we still used to have meetings toward the end of the year where we divide up the money we had earned, and so much to this and so much to that, and
yeah, that was always historically a very important part of the Ladies' Aid and women's clubs also. was
Yeah.
To organize.
they all had some goal or some
Yeah.
thing that they did. And then we bought things for the church. We bought the dishwasher for the church, and I think furnished the kitchen. And the ladies of the church were responsible for keeping the kitchen clean and organized. And at one time, we even cleaned the church in the spring and the fall. Had house cleaning that we went to work. Well, the rural areas, now the one, I've got it written down here someplace, that St. John's was south of town. And then there was one west of town. I can't remember which one that was. Then there was one kind of down in the Wilmington area. And they stayed in their own groups, and just the little bit that I could read here in this book told how the women would walk to Ladies' Aid with a baby in one arm and their lunch in the other. And then I did read in this book where it said that they had a rule that they were only to serve 2 kinds of cake. But that rule didn't last very long because, as usual, the women tried to outdo each other and pretty soon they were serving more things. So the pastor said they had to observe the rule. They could have 2 kinds of sandwiches and 2 kinds of cake. That was to be their lunch. So I thought that was interesting. The little bit, I just got it this noon here, and I haven't had that much time to look at it, but I did see that, and I thought times haven't changed. That's the way it goes now too.
No, people don't change very much actually over time. But now, who coordinated the Ladies' Aid? I mean, I know they had officers, they elected
Yeah.
officers, but did like the minister's wife have any role in,
Well,
coordinating
not
things?
really since I've known anything about it. I think when they started, it was the pastor
Yeah.
that got the women going and organizing into Ladies' Aid.
Mhm.
And the pastor's wife, of course, was expected to go to a lot of them, and
Mhm.
I think he did too.
Oh,
I think the
okay.
pastor did too.
Okay.
I think he conducted Bible study at a lot of them.
So, one gentleman and all these ladies getting together and eating 2 kinds of cake.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good job.
It reminds me of Garrison Keeler's book where he tells about the lunch that was always served at church, sandwiches and jello and cake. And then there was a special recipe for funeral jello. That was jello with bananas in it. That was the funeral jello.
Wow.
And I thought that was pretty typical of Spring Grove too. And I remember one time I was a member of the Dorcas Society. That was the younger women that belonged to that. And we used to serve lunch. We met in the evenings at church. And then after we divided into circles, we always had a festival in the fall, a harvest festival. And each circle did something, had a booth or something to raise money. And one Christmas or one fall, our circle that I belonged to had a Christmas booth. And we worked for months making Christmas decorations, Christmas tree skirts and wall hangings and ornaments. And we really had a lovely booth with all the Christmas things that we had in it. But pretty soon that got to be too much work that we didn't do that anymore.